Yo, what's going on, guys? C4IQ here with the first C4orts podcast slash idea think tank thing. I don't know what to call it, but I am here with someone who does know stuff. My man, KenDeep. What are you saying, dude?
Yo, what's up, man? KenDeep here. Hope you're having a good time and glad to be here on the podcast. Can't wait to discuss some things.
It should be interesting. It should be interesting. For people that don't know, me and Ken go way back in Rev. If anyone follows either of us, you've seen us kind of bicker on Twitter, but we are actually boys, funnily enough. We are actually boys. Probably the reason I bicker with Ken as much as I do is because he's one of the few people that are willing to defend his position. So that's why I do it. When I talk to Ken, at least he'll give me something I can disagree with, where a lot of people don't. They just, throw their hands up, and then I look like the bad guy. But Ken is always fun to talk to. I wanted to talk to him about this, and we're going to be doing like a joint sort of collab on this topic. Ken's is going to be more practical, which means helpful to people, where mine is more for my ego. Let's keep it real. So that's what it's for. We're going to start talking about the concept of a character being Unga or Gorila. That's basically what this is going to be about. Me and Ken are going to touch up upon 4 kind of bullet points to try and summarize our thoughts on it. So the first point we're going to go with is, why do people need to call something Unga or Gorila? The other 3 are going to be, what do people think Unga is or Gorila? What do we believe it is, me and Ken? And why I don't think Leo is under that criteria. So that should be the fun part. I'll put timestamps, so don't worry. If you just want to see me rage, just go to the last timestamp and you'll see. But we're going to start off with, why do people need to call something Unga? Ken brought this up when we were speaking about it, and I thought, I never really thought of why people would need to categorize something, which sounds silly because we have to categorize everything at some point, right? But I never thought why people needed to do it. So I'm more interested to hear Ken's idea on this and on why. So
Yeah, I mean, from my part, I think the majority of why people want to consider something Gorila isn't really like because of the term itself. Like, Gorila sounds like a fun word, or it's implying like something that's like ooh. I think it's more that they have a specific idea of something that's annoying them from multiple characters and from multiple games, and they want to kind of categorize that in one term without really defining the character's play style or tool sets per se. It's more like they want to manifest like an idea of why that character is annoying to them, and I think that's sometimes why they want to have this term and call a character that term, I think.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I think it's a way of summarizing what happened to you in a match, right? Like, if you have like a 1st to 3 with someone, you come away and your friend wasn't there to watch the match and they go, how did it go? It's really easy to go, I just got randomed out. Like, or this guy played Leo and he Unga Bunga'd me. And then the other person will go, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been there. It's like shorthand, right? It's just a very easy way to sum up a 10-minute long match or something. It's kind of trolly and memey, but it does get the message across very well when someone says that. So I can't hate the concept of saying it, because I understand it when someone says it to me. I think outside of that utility, I'm not sure if there's any other use for it. I think where I don't like it is when characters are being described as Unga. I think that's what I push back on, right? So if someone says, what does that character do? And it's like, they just do stuff, they're a gorilla. That's when I think the term is counterproductive, because in that term, it doesn't really explain what the character does, right? Or am I wrong? I don't know, Ken.
Yeah, it kind of depends. Like, I think that it can work to kind of summarize why, or if there's like a common experience with a character. So that there are characters where you would say that you're more likely to encounter them like in a Unga way than with other characters, and I think that's usually when all the players are considering them as Unga characters. So I mean, no one will say like, oh, if we stick with Leo, like no one will say, oh, Tomo is like the biggest Unga player there ever is. There might be some, but people who know their worth, they will not say that.
Yeah.
So I think for them it's more about the character enabling a certain playstyle that's not really thoughtful, and then describe, okay, this character enables that kind of Unga playstyle.
Yeah, yeah, nail on the head. Like, see, look, we do agree on stuff. I think that's exactly what it is. I think it's a playstyle, not an archetype, and we'll get into that further on. But the Tomo example is perfect. If people don't know, Tomo's a Japanese player that I believe played Leo from day one. He's won a couple of tournaments. The biggest one, which I think is the biggest troll, is that he won a single limb first to one tournament. And I was like, yeah, that's when Leo's really strong, because it doesn't give the opponent time to adjust or to figure out a pattern. Where I think Leo's not Unga, because once you do understand the Leo's like attack strings, they're always very unsafe. But if you don't know what they're capable of or their thought process, then yes, it can look random to a degree. But yeah, like we said, we're going to go into that further on. I think that pretty much covers why people would use that term Unga or Gorila. I don't know if there's anything else. Is anything you wanted to touch upon, Ken?
Yeah, I think it's also a little bit like the emotional part of players. Like, I mean, let's be real. There are also people that say that want to, you know, show off their. I mean, not show off per se, but they want to vent, right? Mm-hmm. And calling something a Gorila character or stupid or random or etc. etc. It's a very easy way to vent. That's not it's maybe not super productive, but it doesn't also feel very like you're not attacking someone per se. So, and I think that's also why some people want to use the word Gorila, is because it's just like a venting mechanism, so to speak.
You know what? I never thought about it. That is actually a really good point. I think I'm just a weirdo, and I've got too much pride and ego. Where I hear the word Unga, I feel like it's a personal attack. But if anything, it's the opposite. It's more attacking the character than the player when you use it in that way. Yeah, I never thought about it like that. And that's why you're here. That is exactly why you're here. And I'm glad we're already kicking off with you already changing our mind. That's a good start. But yeah, next we will go into why do people think a character's Unga? And specifically we'll be talking about criteria. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, now we're gonna go and cover why do people think a character's Unga. We're gonna talk about specifics as well when it comes to criteria. But Ken's very eager to jump on this point, and I think he would have a better outlook on this, because I'm going to be very hyper focused on Leo, because I feel Leo in some ways was the forefather of the term Gorila and Unga, probably because of how he plays and his aesthetic, because he looks like a gorilla. So I'm not going to ever deny that. When people say Leo looks like a gorilla, I never argue about that. But yeah, take it away, Ken.
It's honestly, it's pretty complicated. There are different ways of how someone would perceive something as gorilla. Like if you look at Leo, right? They usually people are usually lost in like the strings and how all the. I think in the summary, it's how do you deal with the tools from the character, right? And if you have to play in a different way that's not as straightforward and that is oppressive, as long as you don't have that answer, I think that's when people tend to kind of feel like this character is gorilla. So for example, with Leo, if you get record all day and the cross-up record, you have to play against it completely differently than against other characters, because against other characters in the mid-screen, you can FD to push them out, you can IB and you can backdash and stuff like that. But all these options are actually pretty risky against Leo. And you have to rely on throw in neutral, which is something that a lot of people aren't really used to, having their throw button ready against a cross-up wrecker. And as long as you don't have that ready, most people are not really winning the match because they're just getting mauled over. And I think that's the point where they will say, hey, this is Unga, how do I deal with this, etc., etc.
I agree, because it's not conventional to like you said, throw an offensive move, right? Even in Guilty Gear, where throws were like 1 frame, I think it was a 1 frame throw, and then the window was 1 frame after that, when they put that in, because you couldn't throw tech in the beginning of Rev. But yeah, it is very... It's not very norm. It's not very norm to do that in a lot of games, even with fast throws. And in comparison, I think of someone, it might be more character specific with this example, but I think of a character like Ino. Now, it's not new to have a character where their forward dash puts them airborne. That isn't new. But there's very few characters that do it. Morgan is one of them. You could kind of count Bayo from Skullgirls. But I'm a charge character. So I'm charging flash kick 90% of the time. So to me, it's basically unblockable. It's like I flash kick it or I don't, but she can easily make it safe. So to me, it was, and it's counterintuitive sometimes to think of someone's approach as an overhead. A lot of the times you block low, react high. With Ino, it's the opposite. You react high when she's not in range because, you know, well, she moves forward, she has to do an overhead. She's limited. Bar the special moves she has, which can make her go low. So to me, I'm like, this character's Unga because they can do anything, and a lot of her stuff is safe.
This is how it starts, though.
One good hit could do it here.
This
He
is
gets the
how
right
it starts,
starter.
though.
Spending a little bit of meter, gets the overhead. Big combo. He's dead. No, he dropped it. That could have been it. He had meter for super after. And the Psycho Crusher.
Daru able to keep it together and close it out.
Look at Teresa with his head down. He knows he had that game.
So close.
Oh, that is a heartbreaker. He had it. You know, a little bit of a hit trying to get a knockdown.
Look at that crouching S from Daru to be able to try to interrupt the forward heavy, that dashing kick that Teresa's been using.
And I can't talk about this enough. Again, Daru getting some momentum off an incidental air grab. Just so much mileage off of that.
Throw option select button, able to confirm it to a knockdown. Protect against
what a block.
Wow.
What a block.
Chucks it into the corner. Bad DP. Catching a lot of backdash from Daru. You see Teresa really starting to be able to call out these backdashes. Oh, sit your ass down!
Another incidental air throw against the Ryujin.
And this is just how some rounds go against this character. We've seen it time and time again. Sometimes baby gets put in the corner. You got to be able to deal with it.
Oh, but Abari's out.
And now you're trying to get a little foot loose, but no, I'm gonna blow you a kiss, baby.
Really, really good option there from Daru with the wake up super. Even if that would have been blocked, it would have been plus on block.
Yes.
So
Ino has just some of the best supers in the game, just in general. Anti-air stroke. Once again, we haven't seen that so much this set, but wow, mashing standing punch, anticipating a hop that time. That time Daru just backs up, put that dust out there, and look at the reward. Got the corner, got some gauge.
Wow, tricky. Mix up the falling VCL, one of her recent buffs. Lands that much faster from the VCL when she's falling like that.
Runs right into guitar, and now Daru looking like he's gonna run away with the set here.
Yep, gets hit by the meaty 5D with the dizzy and the perfect. And Daru resets the bracket.
That's
we got
right.
more games to play.
This is not awesome games done quick, but baby, we're gonna hit that reset button.
But you do make a good point in when you first fight Leo, or even years down the line, when you play one Leo versus another Leo and their approach is different, it will feel Unga in comparison to the cast and other Leos. I do agree with that.
Yeah, but a little bit to go against what you said. So for example, you now said that Ino could be considered Unga, right? Mm-hmm. But I've at least from what I've gathered from all the other people that I've talked to from time to time, Ino would be too much of a barrier to really like make that gameplay, which would be considered Unga, actually work. And I think that's also part of what people kind of feel when they experience something that's oppressive, is also how difficult is it to actually do that thing. And that's also why, for example, people don't really consider Johnny Unga, because you have to have the resources ready. You have to. I'm defending Johnny. How's that possible?
What a timeline! What a timeline we're in.
Oh man.
Clip that.
But yeah, you need the resources, and you also need the missed final cancels, and you also need to have your proper spacing. And with Leo, it doesn't have to be like high level or top level viable, but in order to make it feel oppressive already on a low level, there's very little barrier of entry to kind of make that thing that you have to lap especially work. And I think that's also part of why people consider Leo Unga, but for example, Eno, they don't really consider her Gorila at all.
I agree. I think that's a good point. I want to like try and pinpoint focus it. So I agree with the way that I guess noob friendly characters, like I play Leo and I play him because he's not hard. Like I don't have good execution. So me playing a high execution character would either not allow me to express myself as well because I would have to limit the things I can do because execution wise I can't, or it would just hold me back because I'll be spending so much time learning combos I wouldn't figure out how to play matchups or neutral. So would you say it's the execution or the toolkit? So a character having fewer tools makes them more Unga because it's, you know, face roll, me do fireball, me do wrecker, which I'm sure people think about Leo. That's his mix, right? Or is it the fact that it's executionally easier to play Leo? So when you get the hit, it's like baby's first combos. Anyone could do this combo, right? Or is it both? It could be both.
I think it depends. Because we also have to keep in mind. So for example, Unga is also a word that not only low-level players or mid-level players use. We also occasionally hear top-level players name a character Unga, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we all know that the Gorila meme also kind of came from US top players. And Unga is something more that came from Europe, I would say. Mm-hmm. But they both mean essentially the same.
Yeah.
So for example, for top level players, I think it's more about like how you can face roll something. You know, you can just kind of autopilot, and you don't have to think too much about the risk reward situation, and you can just kind of go for your flow, and it can work. Mm-hmm. I think for the high level players, it's more like that. And for the low-level players, it's more about the execution. So it's more about, so do I have to be able to misfire or cancel this thing, or do I just have to do normal into special, and that's it? Mm-hmm. And maybe it can also be different, for example, for intermediate players. That's why I said it's a little bit complicated, because there's no clear definition for Unga and Gorila. So there's also a lot of like interpretations going on. But yeah, I think there are several ways, and I think both the execution and the toolkit make a point for that, depend on the level of the player.
Yeah, I can see. Again, it might be just my perspective. Obviously, if you disagree, down in the comments. But I feel sometimes people say something like this. I've seen it quite a bit in Dragon Ball, where they'll go, "You only won because your character's Unga. Like you're not good enough to play an Eno character or a Johnny character. You can only win because this character allows you to do the least amount of thinking and gives you maximum rule," which kind of does help newer players, whether it, to learn mechanics or a confidence thing from just winning games. That can be a big draw to a new player to a game, right? Getting W's. If you're new to a game, and you went and went, oh yeah, Johnny looks cool, I'm going to learn Johnny, and you didn't win for like a week because he's so hard to use. It's when you're intermediate or advanced, you're not going to feel that because you're like, I know how to play the game. My character's really strong. But when you're new to a game, Johnny's going to look very daunting. And even though people will tell you, oh, your character's so busted, if you're not good enough to do it, you can't. And maybe that's why I think when people say Leo, it's just like, yeah, anyone's like pet dog can pick Leo and get out of pools. So I guess it would be the two things that we spoke about, even though there's kind of like a nuance to him, like you said. Would you say the fact that a character being noob friendly and strong kind of equals Unga Gorila?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think it kind of goes beyond that, because if that were the case, then Kai would also be considered Unga. Or I mean, but it's not something that I hear often.
Yeah, no, right? I think Grinder's pretty Unga. Like you can do Grinder mix with your eyes closed, and I think that's super oppressive. But yeah, the normal people won't say Kai's Unga. Only I would, because I'm different. I'm built different, apparently.
I mean, it's up to discussion, of course. But I could name several examples. I mean, you could also, for example, consider, like, is Bardock considered Unga in Dragon Ball FighterZ versus Kid Buu? I mean, Kid Buu, everyone would agree.
Yeah.
But Bardock is like, people would be a little bit more inclined to disagree. They wouldn't necessarily completely disagree, but they would be like, maybe, but actually no, right? Even though he is not that difficult to play, and he, at least for a while, was really, really good.
Yeah.
And the same can also be said about other characters. So I don't think it's necessarily tied to how strong a character is. I think it's more because also Leo isn't really, I mean, he's good, but he's not high or top tier. So I think there's definitely a disconnect between strength of a character and considering someone or a character being face rollable, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad you said that. Leo is not up there, so that's good to hear, and me not say it. But yeah, what do you think? There's any other specific criteria that we should kind of touch upon in terms of categorizing a character as Unga? I'm trying to think.
So I think also one part that's actually pretty important is the quantity of the not the quality, but the quantity of a tool set. So I think the more tools a character has, the more they're perceived as complex and very. So for example, Ino, again, perfect example. She has a lot of different dives. Her movement is very intricate, especially with her hover dash and how many options she has after that. And that's not something that Leo has, for example. Leo is very linear. And I think this linearity also plays into this Unga-ness, in the sense that you usually only have, like, if your far S or far H gets blocked, what are your options? You can do Rekka or not do anything at all.
Yeah.
But that option to not do something or do something is good, or is what makes this character viable. So I think it's also that part of like complexity and how do I say this the best? I think the less you feel like you have to learn about the character, the more they feel Unga, so to speak.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, I can see that. I've definitely, obviously, looked, seen, studied, helped a lot of Leo players in Rev, and I'll be like, oh yeah, you can't do X, Y, and Z. Like, the example you gave with S into 5H, or one of those two blocks, I'll be like, don't do anything. Most Leos do sweep, which is minus. Some do cross up Rekka, which you can throw, or some do in front Rekka, which is there's a gap. What I do is I fireball, because that's the safest thing to do. But why? When the sweep hits, or the cross up hits, or the same side hits, like, why do all these other Leos need to do what I'm saying you should do because it's the safest option when all those other options hit? So yeah, it makes sense that it's in my head, I see the flaws and I don't do them, but practically those flaws don't exist because they work. Like, even if it's half the time, then it's a mix, then it's a 50-50 at that point. So it's definitely a state of mind that I have where people say, oh yeah, you could do this. And I'm like, I would never do that. Why would you do that? It's super unsafe. But then you watch other Leos, they do, and you're like, man, maybe I just ain't brave enough. Maybe that's what it is. But yeah, I think that's a good point. It's kind of interesting with the characters that a character like Leo seems universal. So, you know, when you were talking about the different levels of play, like pro, intermediate, beginner, Leo transcends all of those levels because everyone can look at him and go, damn, that character is just beating his chest. That's all he's about.
Yeah,
I think that's interesting at so many levels because they're going to be for different reasons, right? For a beginner player to the top player, I'm sure the reason why he's Unga is different, because when I think of like good characters, a beginner Johnny, if I'm starting the game and my mate Johnny Toaster 944, who plays online, he plays Johnny and he's just beginning, right? I'm going to look at that character and go, that character's not that good. I smoke my friend all the time. But at another level, that character is clearly busted. Like, let's keep it real. That character is busted. So there must be like criteria within the levels. I think you kind of touched upon that, why it's so nuanced into why a character would be considered Gorilla.
Yeah, but now that you mentioned that, and I think Leo is a good example, is that maybe it's also due to how, I don't want to, it might sound wrong, so please don't get us the wrong way, but Leo doesn't really change as a character when you level up. So a low-level Leo still kind of has the same game plan as a mid-level Leo, and still has the same game plan like a high-level Leo. So that, for example, is not really true for Johnny. So Johnny, for example, when you're playing against a low-level player, he's super slow. His movement is very limited. You don't really have that many options, and the dashes are very rigid. So he feels much less like imposing. Once you learn a couple of things, for example, his being able to dash, ground dash multiple times in a row, he becomes a little bit quicker, but it also still feels very risky. So it still seems like he has significant risks and danger points, so to speak. And once you get to the top level, then you can kind of see like, oh, actually his movement is super good because he can wire C4orts for super quick screen coverage. You can also do 6K wire C. You can misfire cancel 6H, which is has super long range, and then dash into afterwards. Or you can also fake something with a misfire, backdash cancel, and then whiff punish something. So in that regard, Johnny changes a lot by ranking up in the player levels. And I think that's something that's not as obvious with Leo, because in the end, for most people, a high-level Leo will just seem like a better version of the low-level Leo, so to speak, if you get what I mean.
No, I 100% agree. I never played the mirror match competitively in tournaments because I would look at all the other Leos and go, I know my Leo's better than yours. But because the difference between us is so minute, your, to me, random option is going to blow me up because I wouldn't do it. So I always pick someone like Raven because I'll be like, I just want you as far away as possible and I want to hit you at a range I know safe. So I always pick Raven, and then sometimes I pick Kai. But I 100% understand what you mean about if we've got the 3 levels again, beginner, intermediate, pro. The beginner Leo and the advanced Leo, the difference between them is very small. It's going to be optimal damage and really obscure things like doing 5k into flash kick, which I've only seen Tomo do, and I play on the hitbox, and that's hard to do. So I don't know how he ever did 5k into flash kick. That's still something that I think in itself needs an accolade or a trophy for, because that's crazy. But yeah, other than that, the strategies, the game plan, it does look pretty much the same. I 100% agree. I know you was like, I obviously won't get offended what people say about Leo, other than, you know, the normal stuff about anyone can win with him, because that part I honestly think isn't true. But the gameplay between the levels is pretty much like you said. You couldn't really tell the difference, probably until they got a hit and you go, oh, okay, they don't know the max damage combo, so they're probably like this level of Leo. Yeah, I think so. Like overall, I guess it's a case of a character being bland to a degree, which makes him Unga.
I guess, but then you also have characters like Blanca, which I guess are also considered Unga, but I don't think people consider him bland. So it's getting more complicated the deeper we dive into it. But I think with Blanca, it's also I think bland is maybe the wrong word, because the things that we describe with Leo also kind of apply to Blanca players. Like you can't really see a difference between a low-level Blanca player and a high-level Blanca player. They just seem to roll like all the time.
Yeah,
right?
Literally.
But the difference is the high-level Blanca player knows when to use which tool. And I think it's more about Bland goes in the right direction, but it doesn't really hit it just exactly right. I don't know how to describe it.
Because we've touched upon Leo's at all levels looking very similar. We've spoken about the execution isn't really required to bring out the best in the character. The toolkit's size, I guess. The only other thing with Leo that I could think of is, so when we talk about the tools again, Leo obviously has one tool that I don't think we've mentioned yet, which is back turn counter. Now, the thing with back turn counter is it does everything with one button press and is hard to punish, even though it's punishable. It is hard to punish. And when I think about people saying that the character's Unga, then I see the footage of them getting like crossed up with back turn and then they just mash counter because they mashed DP or something. My initial reaction as a Leo player is, you deserve that. Don't know why you're mashing buttons there. Should have thrown him. But in reality, it's like, damn, he literally just pressed one button and it counted 99% of your toolkit. With maybe tools like that, do you consider that to kind of be Unga, where it's like, me press button, me counter everything you do? That, I would probably have to hold that as an argument for an Unga character.
I think that goes in the right direction. I think, and the term that just like coined in my head was straightforward. Like,
right.
Like it's a straightforward way to play successfully. It doesn't really mean that you have to win, but it means you are able to win situations with very straightforward tools, like for example the parry from Leo or the roll from Blanca, because it's Blanca, whatever region you are in.
Yeah.
So I think that actually touches upon the essence quite well, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Because the only other example I could think of, which people probably wouldn't say is Unga, is Bison. Because Bison's kind of everything we said, maybe very drastically cut in the tool department. He's got literally like 3 moves, right? Street Fighter 4 Bison.
Dictator, by the way.
Yes, sorry, Dictator. Yeah, Europe thing. So yeah, I played him in Street Fighter 4. He did very little damage. He had quite a high execution barrier when you wanted to try and get damage. And all he did was pretty much scissor kick. Like, you use Psycho Crusher for damage every now and again. Head Stomp was annoying, but it wasn't like getting hit by cross-up Wrecker, especially in Strife where you get a combo without counter hit. But everything else seems to relate to Bison, and I don't think anyone called him Bison. I don't think anyone called Dictator Unga. Or maybe there was a case for it and no one ever did it because the game had El Fuerte, Seth, and characters like that kind of blew him out of the water.
I think it does have to do a little bit with perspective. So in a context of Street Fighter 4, Dictator isn't really Unga because you have El Fuerte, my main, by the way.
So you know the feels.
It's fine. He is actually Unga. And you also have characters like Blanca, that what we just talked about. But I think Dictator is also an interesting point because I think he also shows like how a character can change from game to game. So, for example, I would say in Street Fighter 2, people would call him Unga. Yeah. I think. I think in Street Fighter 5, probably to a degree as well. But in Alpha and or Zero, or also in Street Fighter 4, I think people won't regard him as Unga or even at all. And in that way, I think it's also interesting because it kind of also points toward the fact that people don't tie the character, like from the name and the visual style, as much to the feeling of Unga, but it's really more about how do I feel when I'm currently in the match. And so it's also more of a I've played over 100 matches, and my over 100 matches accumulated to this feeling that this character is freaking Unga. And I think that's also an interesting point.
Yeah, I think in Strife it's going to be worse because the stages are smaller and Leo's going to be closer to you. So I think
I'm actually not sure about that, honestly. I think in Strife, the beginner players will regard Leo more as Unga, but I think actually there will be more of a discrepancy between lower level players and high level players when it comes to Leo.
Yeah, no, I agree with that part. Yeah, I was on the perspective of when everyone's kind of new to the game, everyone's going to go, this character Leo, he's just always in my face. Where in Rev, you had to get in their face. It was a lot easier because of like YRC. There's no YRC in Strife, but the stages are smaller. So Leo doesn't have to do as much to get close to you and then start his nonsense. That's what I was thinking, yeah. But I do think from the beta, I could see like kind of 4 to 3 categories. Beginners, people that played the beta prior, Leos from Rev. I could definitely see Leos from Rev from the options they picked, and it's like, oh, this is kind of muscle memory, and I was in that camp. And then there was Leos that like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna do the bare minimum and try and outplay you in a game where I think personally the mechanical aspects of Strife do help Leo. I think they make him stronger, especially like the counter, not needing counter on cross-up wrecker and people not being ready to throw it. IBs being slightly different as well, not reducing block stun, it made me feel stronger because it's like, oh, cool, if you IB this and I still go for cross-up, it's still just as hard. Where in Rev, if you IB'd it, then I went for cross-up, you've got a bigger window to throw me. So I felt empowered because it's like, yeah, this game mechanic seems to favor this playstyle with Leo. It could turn out completely different because obviously that was only in the beta. But you kind of touch upon the point of the perspective. And I think the mechanics of a game do dictate that. And you made the example with Bison, because even from 4 to 5, Bison's toolkit is obviously like crazy in comparison. He's got Slayer dashes, he's got fireballs, he's got he doesn't need scissor kick anymore because he's got that fireball thing that comes out of his hand as well. So yeah, it is a lot of aspects, it seems, that determine what a character is interpreted in that game. So there could be an alliteration of Leo with the toolkit in another game where he's not Unga and he's super honest, like Kai is honest. Kai with that grinder, I think, is quite honest. So yeah, Strife Kai then. He seemed pretty fair.
And I think it's also something that can evolve in a game. So, for example, I think it was interesting that you, for example, mentioned that Kai in Rev is Unga. And for a long time, people would have disagreed immediately. They would have said, no, Kai is honest, he is neutral base, he is, But actually, at least from my limited experience, so to be fair, the contact that I have are a little bit more regional now. But the people that I talk to, they actually feel that Kai is more Unga than what the people from 3 or 4 years ago thought. So in that sense, I think a character can also develop just due to how is the toolkit used, or what's the normal Kai experience, for example. So I think for example, Leo in Strife will be a case of where a lot of people will think he is Unga early on, but after a year or two, when people kind of figure out how to play him, even on the low level, because it will be a little bit easier to learn the matchup, I think people probably won't consider him Unga anymore. I mean, that's also something that I already noticed when people like Damascus or also Slash and a couple of other people who really know their stuff, but they didn't have any Guilty Gear experience. And they asked me, what am I supposed to do against Leo? He's just wrecking all the time and I can't do anything. I'm like, just throw. He was like, there's no way that can work.
Yeah.
And then they tried and they were like, oh, okay. Right?
Problem
it's
solved.
Just a little bit of knowledge, which can also make a difference on if a player perceives the character as Unga, because then suddenly they have the answer and the majority of their time against that character suddenly is no longer oppressive. So
yeah,
I think it can change over time as well, just inside of one context too.
Yeah, like literally having that one answer, it might not make the character for that person. So for example, if I think Leo's Unga, actually no, let me use May as example. If I go, oh, May's Unga, right? And then someone in Rev tells me, oh, you just press 6p after she does a dolphin. because you'll just counter hit her if she does it again. If she doesn't do it again, you'll recover in time to block. And I'm like, huh, I never thought about that. I always tried to jump away and got hit in pre-jump, or I tried to hit slash and I got counter hit, whatever. They told me this. I take that technique, try it in a match, and it works. Not that it just hits them all the time, but it stops the RPS afterwards, right? That to me, still in my heart, I'm gonna go, May's just Gorila. They're just doing stuff. No May player thinks. They're just doing dolphin. Once in a while, they pretend to play neutral and call Otter while I see him run forward, whatever. The character will still have the title of Unga, even though I have the answer to make them feel less Unga. And I don't know, from everything we've spoken about, right? When we've spoken about execution, toolkit, the evolution of the character, the mechanics of the game, all of these things, and the level of play dictating if a character would be considered Unga. When it comes down to it, I think the title will always remain from your first experience. If you got destroyed by a Leo in the first month of playing Strife, 3 years down the line, you're gonna go, Leo's such a Gorila, but I know how to beat it. I think that's the takeaway. I could be wrong. I think that's maybe just how I feel. When I used to get beat by Venom, that was like the biggest and the longest matchup dedication, like Tibetan mountain training thing I ever did. Shout out to Shawnee. I was like, if I need to know how to beat Venom with Leo, otherwise I'm never going to get out of pools, because every tournament I went to, Sean went to. So I had to learn the matchup. And I was like, this matchup is impossible. There's literally nothing I can do. It's just 10-0. I learned it with him. And I was like, okay, it's just... the character is stupid. I will say that. The character is very stupid, but there are flaws. And even with that mindset that the character has flaws, I still think the character's stupid, even though I know things you can do. And I thought like that until Johnny came out, and I was like, well, this is no point. Like, Johnny actually is just busted. But yeah, I think the title you give to a character when you first interact with them can stay the whole time, even when you figured out why you thought like that in the past. Like, which I think is interesting. It could just be me. What do you think about that?
No, I mean, definitely. First impressions are always important. It doesn't only apply to fighting games and Unga. It applies to everything, I think. Mm-hmm. The first impression that you have from something usually is the one point that you kind of remember. So, like, if you play against a character the first time. So, for example, I remember when I first picked up Hey Yun, and people back then, they were like, no, you can't play in tournament. It's too early. Because, I mean, to be fair, it was kind of like he came out on Thursday, and then there was a big tournament already on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I can totally get that.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, you can't do that, right? And I think in hindsight that was a good thing, because else I probably would have mauled over a lot of really good players that just didn't have the time to prepare against this character, and that would have then made them think like, hey, Yun is super Unga, or he's super stupid and stuff like that. Or she, depending on if you were talking about the robot or not.
Yeah.
But in a sense, so their first experience with Hey Yun was in casuals. So it wasn't really, there was no stakes, there was nothing really important going on. It was just like, let's check out this character in practice mode. Let's figure out some stuff. I'm also still kind of new to the character, so I'm dropping combos all the time. So that also made everyone who I've played with regularly, also on high level, not really feel like this character is stupid. And then like the like 3, 4, 5 months where I actually played the character really, really well, they don't really remember these matches as prominently as maybe like the first couple of days. Doesn't really mean that they are always like, that one day where the character came out. But like, it's more of a subconscious thing. Mm-hmm. Right, so they have their emotions tied to the memory of that first moment or of those first days, I think. So I definitely feel that does have an impact on that as well.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you kind of echoed that. It makes the fight that I'm fighting worthwhile, because I don't want people to go into Strife thinking Leo's Unga. I don't want that. Like, for my pride, as well as I don't want people to lose to bad Leos. Like, I've never wanted that. Like, half of my YouTube channel is teaching people how to beat Leo. Like, I don't want people to lose to bad Leos. If it's a good Leo, fine. But losing to the basic stuff, which I think is obviously very daunting when you, especially, I think with anything, right? When you get told, oh, your character wins this matchup, you shouldn't lose because you can do X, Y, and Z. To do the X, Y, and Z perfectly every time is going to be very daunting at first, right? When you're not used to those mechanics. Like you said, with the example about throwing his wrecker, you tell them it and they're like, well, I didn't think about that. And then they do it. Not everything's like that. Sometimes it's like, my muscle memory is not ready to throw a wrecker, which is very understandable, especially for people that have come from like Street Fighter, especially like 4. You could never imagine throwing Fei Long out of his wrecker. Like, it would never cross your mind, right? So yeah, I think one other thing I wanted to touch upon before we move on to the next one is, do you think damage plays a part in it? Because with all the things that we've spoken about, right, in terms of a character being Unga, if they didn't do any damage, do you think anyone would complain? Or I guess it's not complaining, that's not fair. Would you think they would still get the title of Unga if they didn't do damage? Do you think the Unga / Gorilla, the Gorilla part makes me think, damn, I'm going to get absolutely destroyed if I don't do something immediately, where characters that don't hit you very hard don't give you that kind of fear? Like, it's like a death by 1,000 needles, like the chip way of killing you.
I think it's not necessarily tied to damage, but it can be. So I think it's definitely a factor that plays into it for characters like Mei. So there is definitely the factor of like, oh man, she got in once and then I ate a counter hit and then I'm suddenly dead.
Yeah. Shout out to Slayer as well. Slayer used to do that a lot.
Yeah, but for example, Slayer, people don't regard Slayer as much as an Unga character.
They don't.
Even though his damage output is insane. Same also for Potemkin. At least in XR.
Yeah.
Strife is another story.
Yeah, Strife, yeah. You might get that title very soon.
Yeah. But so for example, I think there are also characters who are not really super damaging, who still get treated as Unga. So for example, Blanca, I think, is such a character. His damage output is usually quite mild in comparison to other characters like Evil Ryu or El Fuerte, or also, I don't know, Honda or Zangief. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also more to do with how many opportunities do I have to also get my momentum, right? So for example, Blanca is a character that doesn't really do a lot of damage once, but he can stick to you and you always have to make a guess. So it becomes really difficult, at least on a lower level, to really escape. And that way damage accumulates very quickly. It's not really that he does a lot of damage with opening you up once, but he damages you over time.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a mixed bag. I think damage can play a role, but it depends on the context.
Okay, cool. I mean, that goes perfectly into the next segment, which we're going to do, which is what do we think Unga is? So yeah. We are going to basically this is going to be the opinion point of the podcast. A lot of P's in it. So I think the best way to do this is like because we covered a lot of aspects that can guide someone down to calling the character Unga, right? In the last segment. So here I think we should maybe take those into consideration, maybe bring some other ones to the table, but name 3 things we think are like the most important, like paramount to why a character's Unga. Do you want to... Oh, actually, you know what might be better? If we do one at a time. So
sounds good.
I do my first, you do your first. Okay, so to me, even though it was the last thing we spoke about, and that's why I brought up, I think damage is definitely one of them. I feel, like I said, you made a very good point about the Potemkin thing. So even in Rev, when Potemkin was in range of Potbuster, I felt like I was getting overpowered by a Gorilla. Like, I felt the pot player was doing less thinking than me on defense, which I think is obviously a game plan that most people want to do, right? You don't want to feel like you're guessing on your advance. And that's one thing I do feel Leo suffers from. With certain characters, his back turn, when he's in back turn, it's our Oki. it's mine and yours, especially against someone like Soul, because Soul could just wake up wild throw me or DP me. So my counter isn't as a strong option as it is against other characters. So yeah, when I'm back turn and I've knocked Soul down, it's our Oki. It's not just mine. I can get mixed even though you're knocked down. Where Pot, everyone seems like a victim when he's pot busted you because he gets a safe jump. And you see him do the safe jump, press buttons, sweep you, or do pot buster. And on the defense, you're thinking, he's just not thinking. He's literally just flipping the coin every time, which what most people want their offense to feel. You want it to be a 50-50. You want to be as unorthodox as possible. But I feel the pot players is like, damn, either one of these hit, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. Like with the sweep, if they've got bar, they can do as much damage as a pot buster easily. And let's not talk about if you're in the corner and you get the Urian shoulder charges to death. Like, he doesn't need to grab you in a lot of situations. So for me, I have to put the amount of damage because it always reminds me of playing Bison. And it's like, yeah, scissor kicks are super annoying. They're safe on block. They're great on hit because they leave you standing and you do another roundhouse. The only thing you can do against it is guess jump. You have to guess a neutral jump. And if I'm being oppressive and you have to guess in neutral, I think that's pretty Unga. That's not me thinking. I don't have to think to do a scissor kick. But why it's not like a very Gorila strat is because you don't die from scissor kick. You die if you get hit by 100 of them, yeah, sure. But you die from hitting the roundhouse kicks, not the scissor kicks. So yeah, for me, I would have to put damage as one of the criterias for being classed as Unga.
I think for me, number one for sure would be lack of knowledge. So for me, it's definitely that that factor of people not knowing the answer or not knowing necessarily how you reply to something that's that feels very oppressive. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of get stopped on with being like, oh man, I'm getting mauled over here. What am I supposed to do? He's just face rolling over me and he's just mashing buttons, and without really like realizing what the answer is. And for me, like that's, at least for me personally, that's the number one thing that always makes me feel like that's why a person calls something or someone Unga. And yeah, it's also ironically something that I feel is kind of stopping players from getting better. Because it's the exact reason why they're calling someone Unga is the same reason why they're not getting better at dealing with that character. So I think for me it's a lack of knowledge. I think that would pretty much sum it up.
That was going to be my second answer. I'm not going to lie to you. I'll pick another one. I do want to touch upon like the lack of knowledge. Playing a character that people think is Unga, and then my response always being, but you can do this, kind of should be the, oh, okay, they're not Unga, I just need to get better. Like, it should be that response. Obviously, it's not always that easy. But yeah, answer is definitely one I would put out there. Other than that, I would probably say when one tool does too much, I think there's a line between simplicity and Swiss Army knife. And when you've got a tool that does so many things that you don't need to think about the repercussions or the options that beat it because it's so minute, that can make you think that the opponent who's using the Unga character isn't thinking. It reminds me of counter against majority of the cast. You've got a one frame counter that stops supers, bursts, literally everything in the game, bar throw, and unblockables. So Slayer's undertow used to hit it, but they'd have to charge it up, and by then I'll dash out of the way anyway. But there was so few tools in the whole game that beat it, and it's one frame. It requires zero execution, other than I need to be in the stance. I think they balanced it well, because in back turn stance, there's certain things you can't do, like block, and you had to leave the stance to like jump and whatnot. But yes, that tool is for me one of the most insane tools, which was so reasonable. I think he needed that for certain matchups like Venom, because you just can't get in. Like, when you're back turn, the Venom matchup is a 50-50 because his strongest tool, which is his fireballs, are his weakness because he can't stop his own fireballs. Stinger is super strong against Venom, believe it or not. So yeah, I would put that in there. So I guess I would call it easy Swiss Army knife. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would also be my second point. Like, I would rather describe it as straightforwardness in a way. When a character when a character can rely on a low amount of tools. I mean, that's also what we touched upon and discussed actually quite extensively. When a character can really rely on a few amount of tools that not necessarily do a lot, but the things that they do it really, really well, and you have to deal with that tool. I think that's definitely something that I would say is Unga engaging, so to speak. And I don't necessarily would say that's something that I would say, like I would call it Unga, because then for me that would also mean that Axel Low would be considered Unga, because he has he's also relying on very specific tools and very specific ranges. But I think that in combination with the other aspects, and especially like the lack of knowledge and also the third spot that I'm going to mention as well, I think that's definitely a big reason why something is considered Unga, and I think I would also put it quite importantly high. Yeah.
Okay, so my last one, I don't think we spoke about it much. I think I touched upon it a little bit. For me, it would have to be risk reward. Kind of going back to Bison, there was very little risk other than neutral jump for doing scissor kick. On block, it was completely safe. When I think of an Unga character, I don't think of the mentality like, oh, I'm doing something random. I think of the mentality as like, I can do this and there's nothing you can do about it. Sort of like Bison Matt play. So IAD Matt from Bison, there's stuff you can do. It's very hard to deal with though. Very, very hard. So every time a Bison does it, they're not thinking, damn, I might just get counter hit 2H. Like by Leo, like table flip. It can happen. It definitely can happen to you as a Bison player. But the likelihood of it happening is tiny. And then you go a little bit deeper into the risk reward of like Milio Oki. Now, the tandem top stuff, there's very, very small risk for the Milio to do it. And a lot of that risk comes from if they mistime it. Because for the most part, even in Rev with different wake up timings, that disc is just me. It's literally just me by default. So a character that allows you not to fear anything, I think is the epitome of being a gorilla. Because I don't think of a gorilla being scared. I think of a gorilla just doing what it's designed to do. And yeah, I guess it's literally the semantic part of the gorilla / Unga part where it's like, well, they don't seem to be scared. They're not calculating all of these things because they know it's, I'm doing this. There's one thing you could do. I don't think you're going to do it. Cool, let's go. So yeah, I would say the risk reward for me is going to be my last option, my last point about Unga.
I think it's also a good point, and I think it's also something that a lot of people would agree on. But it's not going to be my point, though.
No.
No. but I think it's also good that you mentioned it, because it's something we didn't, as you said, we didn't really touch upon. But I think it's also a core part of what a lot of people consider with Unga is just simply, as you called it, the risk reward. But now, for me personally, I think my last point, and also of the top 3 points that I would consider for Unga being relevant, is context. So, for example, if we say this risk reward and not being scared to do this certain stuff, that's every Dragon Ball character, and so every Dragon Ball character has a super dash, and that super dash is essentially that manifested as a mechanic. But still, we do have characters that we would consider Unga in this game, which is Kid Buu, for example. And I think it has a lot to do with context, because it's also important of how much does that character have these Unga like characteristics compared to all the other characters and compared to the mechanics, and I think that plays a really big part, because else you could also consider a character like Majin Buu Unga, though I guess he's actually pretty difficult, and maybe there are a couple of people who would consider him Unga, but there's also maybe like adult Gohan you could consider Unga, or maybe like base Goku, except for like vanilla base Goku because he was trash.
Yes.
Right, and you could consider all of these characters Unga, but they won't, because in context and comparison to Kid Buu and UI Goku and SS4 Goku, Gogeta, they're relatively tame. So for me, I think context and like comparison is really, really important for the definition, so to speak, for Unga and Gorila.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think they're very fair points. Other than like the one in the middle about the army knife and the straightforwardness, I think they're all fairly reasonable things to consider when talking about the character. But speaking of reasonable, the next part is me, and it's about why I don't think Leo is Unga. So yeah, we'll go cover that. Okay, so this section, why I think Leo's not Unga. If you're expecting like a really long rant, you're not going to get that, unfortunately. I think it's pretty simple. So something we haven't really hammered home is, I think in most of the concepts we've talking about, not all of it, it's about a tool or an aspect of a character. So like an archetype of a character. I do not believe any character is Gorilla Unga. I think Unga is a playstyle. Even though we have been talking about things that a character can do, when I think of the term Unga, I feel that is a way, Ken, I think you touched upon this about the lack of knowledge. And that was my knee-jerk reaction when I first heard of, like, when I first thought about doing this collab with Ken, was that people are just bad, they're not good, and they don't know how to lab, so they can't deal with these Unga characters. Because for me, a good character is an Unga character that is has no risk. That's what I would class Johnny as. Johnny's Unga, but he's got those not just the safety, he's got the veil of execution. So people go, yeah, he's pretty oppressive, he can just do what he wants, but it's hard to do, which is a fair point, and Ken brought that up, same with Eno. But to me, the veil of the execution doesn't work. So when I see what that character can do, I'm just looking at it on paper. That's not fair, that's Unga, that's Gorilla to me. And again, that's obviously just my take. And that is why I feel the playstyle determines the Unga-ness a bit more, because we also touch upon a beginner Johnny. A beginner Johnny is not going to be Unga to me. So then it's not the character, it is the playstyle or the player. So there are definitely characters that allow the expression of Gorilla to manifest more on the screen, right? Which is Leo. Leo can personify a Gorilla mindset as a dance of combat on the screen, for sure. He's very good at doing that. So can May. And then you have some characters like Axel. Axel, you can't think of being Gorilla. You won't, even though it's super annoying, stuff like Rensin, or every time they wake up doing a DP and Rev, like you wouldn't go, this character's Unga, because of an archetype of being, you know, keep away or lame or zoning. Those tend to not be able to mesh together. I'm trying to think, there must be a character in the comments, let me know, a character that zones that's Gorilla. There must be one. I just don't know him yet.
Maybe Minao in Street Fighter 5 could be considered that. Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, those orbs, they don't look like they're thinking very much whenever those orbs out, I'm not gonna lie. They're not scared of any jump-ins because it's like 3/4 of the screen. So yeah, that could be one of them. But yeah, for the most part, Gorillas are like characters that are in your face, doing stuff that you can't react to or do crazy damage if you let yourself get hit by it. They're the aspects of a character that are translated for a player, because you could play Leo with just fireballs and flash kicks. I've had tournament matches, I promise you, where I've not gone for a record just to prove a point, because I am that much of an arsehole. I will do that. I will have my mates in the background saying your character just wins, and I'm like, look, I won't do Wrecker. I will only do forward Wrecker. I'll never do cross-up Wrecker, and I still win because I know I can play the character like that. I'm clearly limiting myself. I'm, stroking my ego, but I feel because I can prove that point, it doesn't mean that the character doesn't express Gorilla. I'm just saying the playstyle is more of a factor into why a character is Gorilla. That's my opinion. It was a little bit harsher at the beginning before we started this podcast. I honestly am not just saying that because he's here. Ken brought up perfect points to make me kind of like wheel back in terms of context. Definitely in context. That's something I need to remember when I'm looking at why someone is saying a character's Gorilla. I don't think about it in context. I think about it from my perspective, which is on paper, I know X, Y, and Z. So that's a very, very good point. And obviously like evolution. Leo might have been kind of Gorilla in Rev, whatever. I'll throw in the towel. Yes, he was Gorilla in Rev, whatever. In Strife, it could be completely different. And to give it time for people to develop the understanding of the game, to go, okay, this character could be considered Unga because of X, Y, and Z. Now that we know what are good aspects or good tools to have in the game. So yeah, Ken did an amazing job, which he also does on his channel because he's going to be talking a bit more about this subject and expanding it into archetypes. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you're going to be doing over there, my friend?
Yeah, sure. So on my channel, I will be talking about why we try to put things into archetypes. So not only gorillas or Unga characters, but also things like Keep Away and Rushdown characters, and try to figure out why we do that, and also how we can use that information to benefit us, and also see how that information could also potentially hurt us in a way where we maybe limit ourselves in our understanding of a character. So if you're interested to learn a little bit more about understanding characters and how to approach them, or how to approach matchups due to the archetypes, check it out. I would be really, really welcomed if you, you would be welcomed if you would check out my video. So much appreciated. And yeah, C4, it was really, really nice having that talk. This was also for me a little bit refreshing to kind of see all these different perspectives as well, which I think will be also worthwhile points for the video that I will do.
Yeah.
And just as a heads up to everyone, my video will not be about like bashing the idea of an Unga or anything like that. And I don't think that was our point either. It's more about trying to figure out why we even consider something Unga and how we can use that information to improve ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. Hopefully this was, helpful, insightful. There was obviously a little bit of banter as well. And, me having a little rant at the end. I'm sure everyone likes to see, my Twitter statements in IRL. I'm sure that's really fun for people. But yeah, hopefully this does, help some people. That's the most important thing. If you find it insightful, even if we didn't, or I say Ken's super reasonable. If I didn't convince you that Leo's not Unga, I think on this podcast you've been pretty reasonable compared to me. Context. It's all about context.
Next podcast we'll talk about Johnny, and then you'll see how reasonable I am.
That's it. It is all about context. It depends what we're talking about to see how unreasonable we are. But obviously because it's a lot more closer to me, and the topic is obviously about the character. Like I love Leo. Like he's just my favorite character almost of all time. I think as long as people kind of, what I've got from this is thinking about the concepts or things that you find difficult in the game or hard to understand, just thinking about it a little bit. Hopefully the podcast at least did that. Obviously the links for Ken's will be down below for his YouTube. As you can see on the screen, go follow him on Twitter. Before you follow me, definitely follow Ken. Way more helpful to the community than me.
You're doing a lot of good stuff, man.
I'm trying. I just can't do it while saying nice things. So it's kind of counterproductive. But that's just who I am. So yeah, hopefully me and Ken can do this again. It would be fun to do the Johnny one. That definitely would be fun. But no. I don't want to trigger any like PTSD or anything like that because I was there with you, man. I was Johnny, man. Johnny. Damn,
Man,
what a character.
I think people have heard enough about me ranting about Johnny in the last couple of 5 years.
Mate.
But we can do one about Hey Yun if you want.
I would be interested in that. I thought he was quite a reasonable character, funny enough. Even though his Oki used to drive me up the bend, like I did think he/she was a reasonable character. So I would be interested to see your thoughts on him. I thought he was pretty strong. I don't think he had many flaws other than being a big body.
Yeah, we can discuss that in the next
exactly.
video, sure.
You know what? I'm here to be informed. I definitely need to be informed. This not a character I played against much or touched. So yeah, definitely would like to do this with Ken and anyone else who's willing to suffer sitting with me for like an hour and a bit and listen to my crazy opinions. But yeah, like I said, links down below to Ken's content, not just the video he's going to be putting out. He's been putting out content before this as well, and obviously yeah, follow him on Twitter. And yeah, I guess I'll see everyone else at some point when I have another topic I want to talk about, I guess. So peace.